Angry outbursts is the third love buster that we're going to be talking about this morning. It's deliberate attempts to hurt your spouse because of anger, usually in the form of verbal and physical attacks. Angry outbursts is not only the third love buster, but it's also the third and most dangerous stage of abuse and control. I want you to understand that if you think you have the right to control your spouse, if you think you have the right to dominate your spouse, if you think you have the right to abuse your spouse, you're likely to be demanding, you're likely to be disrespectful, and you're likely to lose your temper. Those three things kind of go hand in hand, and they are the elements of a fight. So if the taker is in charge, you're going to do these three things to get what you want. The goal is going to be to make you happy. You're going to be demanding, you're going to be disrespectful, you're going to be angry to make you happy. But is it going to make your spouse happy? No. And because it's not going to make your spouse happy, it means that you are not providing extraordinary care. And as an aside, you're not going to get what you want anyway. It's going to be more difficult for you to get what you want if you think you can use abuse and control to actually achieve important objectives in marriage. So it's the third and most dangerous stage of abuse and control, something I am very, very opposed to in marriage. It's the feeling that those who cause your unhappiness deserve to be punished. If your spouse doesn't do what he or she is supposed to do for you, by golly, we're going to do something to your spouse that will teach him or her a lesson that he or she won't forget. It's how you try to get your way, or at least even the score, when demands and disrespect don't work. When you have an angry outburst, you're trying to hurt your spouse. In an angry outburst, you are actually doing the opposite of extraordinary care. You have decided to be extraordinarily careless, extraordinarily hurtful. Your spouse becomes the victim of the very worst that is in you. We're born with the instinct to have angry outbursts and must learn habits to override them. My argument about anger and angry outbursts is that it is something we need to learn to overcome. Every single person needs to learn to overcome it. Some people learn to overcome it as children because their parents taught them to overcome it. But for those of you whose mother or father didn't take it too seriously, and you managed to get out of the home with angry outbursts still intact, your spouse is now stuck with it. And I have to tell you that your spouse can't do anything to get you over your angry outbursts. You are the only one that can do it. If your mother and father left you with angry outbursts, you are the only one left to do something to avoid it. But everybody, I mean everybody, can overcome angry outbursts, and you can eliminate them entirely. You can learn habits to override this instinct once and for all. Angry outbursts serve a short-sighted purpose. You may get what you want now, but you're less likely to get it later. Angry outbursts do not lead to habit formation. They create aversive reactions, and they destroy love bank balances. They do the exact opposite of whatever it is you're wanting your spouse to do. You will not solve any marital problem if you can't control your temper, because the problem itself will sit on the shelf unsolved as long as your spouse feels threatened by your angry outbursts. There's no way that your spouse is going to enter negotiation with you about a problem in your marriage if there is the risk that you're going to lose your temper in the midst of discussing the problem. And so your spouse is not going to want to deal with it. And so the longer you're married, the more these problems are going to pile up. I want to teach you ways of solving your problems once and for all. I want you to eliminate problems. I want you to resolve conflicts. And I got to tell you that angry outbursts will make that impossible. So unless you get rid of your angry outbursts, you're not going to be able to solve any problems that you have in your marriage. Angry outbursts make your spouse avoid the problem instead of wanting to solve the problem. If your spouse says, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. What does your spouse mean by that? Your spouse is threatened by your reaction when you talk about it. Remember I said 4 guidelines for successful negotiation begins with it being pleasant and safe. Safe. That means that in the course of our conversation, there's going to be no risk of an angry outburst. When I talk to you about my problem, I guarantee you I will have a smile on my face. We will not be disrespectful. I will not be angry. I will not be demanding. We are just going to talk about this. They make your spouse want to punish or leave you. I mean, if you lose your temper, what most spouses do in response is lose their temper. Then you have a big fight, throw things around, call the police. The husband gets sent to jail. Basically, it's pointless. It doesn't work. They must be overcome, angry outbursts must, before you can address any other marital problem. Okay, how do you do that? How do you overcome angry outbursts? Well, first you have to acknowledge the fact that your spouse does not cause your angry outbursts. You cause them. Now that's a tough one. That's a real tough one for most people. Now I have worked with scores, probably hundreds. I would probably hundreds of people that have angry outbursts. Many of them have come right out of prison. They come right out of prison. And it's my job to make sure that they don't go back to prison. And they got to prison because they hurt somebody. In some of the cases that I've worked with, they've actually murdered somebody. And it's my job to make sure they never lose their temper again. I got to tell you that I have an easier time working with people that have spent some time in prison than I do with people that haven't spent time in prison. They take the problem far more seriously because the next time they lose their temper, they're going to spend even more time in prison. So I've got their attention, and they'll do anything I ask them to do because they don't want to go back to prison. And they say, you're the expert, tell me what to do. The first thing I tell them what to do is that your angry outbursts are caused by you. And they say, boy, psychology, it just doesn't make sense. But you're the boss, it's caused by me. I said, yep, it's caused by you. Your angry outbursts, that when somebody does something that irritates you, you do not have to have an angry outburst. And I'm going to teach you how not to have an angry outburst. When somebody does and says something that's disrespectful, when somebody does and says something that's irritating to you, I'm going to show you how not to have an angry outburst. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, make a commitment to yourself and your spouse that you'll overcome angry outbursts even if it means getting professional help. Now, in this case, I was the professional help, but the point is that for you may not need professional help. You may be able to do this on your own. But you have to begin with the assumption that it's up to you to overcome angry outbursts. Your spouse is never going to say or do anything to cause your angry outburst. You're the one that causes it. Make a commitment that you're never going to lose your temper again the rest of your life. And if you do ever lose your temper again, you're going to go and get professional help from an anger management specialist. Identify your angry outbursts and their effects on your spouse. Do you know when you're having an angry outburst? I had a doctor once tell me that his angry outbursts were actually an expression of his creativity. And that what he was really doing was giving her a vision of the turmoil that was going on inside of him. And in an intimate relationship, people need to understand each other in the depths of their soul. And when he had an angry outburst, she had a clear vision into the agony that he was experiencing. Well, he might have thought that that's what was happening. But I was there when he had an angry outburst in my office, and it was not that. Both his wife and I recoiled at his angry outburst. I mean, both of us ran for cover. We weren't looking into his psyche at the time. We weren't saying, oh, isn't that interesting? We're getting to know him better. Isn't this creative? Isn't he being interesting? Nope. We were ready to leave. And that's what angry outbursts do to people. They make them want to leave you. You tend to forget what you did when you're angry. It's an interesting thing about an angry outburst. You can't remember the details. You're spouse sure can. Understand what happens to you when you get angry. Think about it. Think about this process. I've had people actually go to the trouble of videotaping an angry, that actually is irritating. If you're having an angry outburst and somebody's videotaping you. But on the other hand, it's a great eye-opener if you can actually witness what you look like. What do you look like when you're angry? This is what your kids are seeing. This is the vision that your kids have when you're trying to teach them an important life lesson. This demon that commands no respect whatsoever. It's temporary insanity. I have said this for years, that all of us are insane when we lose our tempers. All of us. All of us experience insanity when we lose our tempers. And all of us are out of control when we lose our tempers. You can kill somebody when you lose your temper. Matter of fact, many murders that are committed are not committed by design. They're committed in the act of a bad temper experience. They have lost their temper, they've lost control, they've become insane, and they kill somebody. You cannot afford to lose control. You cannot afford to be insane. It is going to make you a miserable person to be around if you think you can be angry and lose your temper as a matter of expressing your inner self. Step number 4, try to avoid frustrating situations, but if they can't be avoided, learn to relax when faced with those situations. So with all these guys that I work with, I teach them relaxation training. I teach them meditation. I teach them how to close their eyes, relax. Why? Because I want the adrenaline to get out of their system. There is a chemistry to losing your temper. There's something going on when you lose your temper. There is biochemical events taking place that you can control with relaxation. So if you're faced with a very frustrating situation, you close your eyes, you relax. You don't think about the frustrating situation because that's going to create more adrenaline. You get out of the situation so you can relax. Now, that relaxation, every time you avoid an angry outburst, every time you're successful in getting away from a situation that would have caused you to lose your temper, you're actually rerouting the neurons in your brain. You're actually telling your brain, we're not going to handle things this way anymore, we're going to handle things that way, and your brain chemistry actually changes. Also, your biology changes. The neurotransmitters in your brain change. The adrenaline that gets into your bloodstream as a result of a frustrating situation changes. And your actual thoughts change. In other words, when you practice not losing your temper, when you practice being calm, you are actually reprogramming yourself so that you're not likely to do it again. I have worked with many, many people over the years where they not only get to a point where they never lose their temper, but they don't even feel like losing their temper. And I'm one of them. I had a very bad temper when I was young, and I decided in my early 20s that I was never going to lose my temper again. And I did essentially what I train other people to do. I learned to relax under frustrating circumstances, and I got a control over it. And in my marriage, I never lose my temper. Absolutely never lose my temper. And I almost never lose my temper in other situations. And I can tell you that I am a different person from what I was when I was young. I'm different. My brain's different. I've trained my brain to respond differently to frustrating situations. Adrenaline feeds anger. Relaxation helps dissipate adrenaline. You can think more clearly when you relax. You're more likely to find solutions to the problem. Remember, an angry outburst is temporary insanity. Don't let it happen. If either of you has an angry outburst, get help. Eliminate it entirely. If you cannot control your temper, get professional help. Angry outbursts should not be tolerated in your marriage.